You know, the morning starts the way an overwhelming majority of mornings do. It begins with like a mechanical disruption.
Right, a sudden jarring alarm.
Exactly. It just pulls you from that formless, limitless landscape of your dreams and, well, drops you instantly back into the heavy reality of the physical world.
It's a harsh transition.
Yeah, you swing your legs over the edge of the bed, and the floorboards are this cold shock against your bare feet. It's a very sharp sensory reminder that the sanctuary of rest is over.
The day has officially started, whether you're ready or not.
Right. And you walk into the kitchen, the house is still wrapped in that quiet, dim light of early day, and you go through the ritualistic brewing of coffee. It's entirely automatic.
Completely muscle memory at that point.
Yeah, you just stand there leaning against the counter, watching the steam rise and curl into the cool air, listening to the quiet sputtering of the machine. And right there in that fragile space between waking up and stepping out the front door or um, opening the glowing screen of a laptop, it happens. The sigh. A heavy, almost imperceptible sigh escapes your chest.
I think we all know that exact sound,
Mm.
and it's a sound that carries an immense weight. Because that morning sigh is not just about fatigue, it often contains a vast, unspoken realization about the nature of the life being lived.
Yes, exactly. Because in that moment, you and I am speaking directly to you, the listener, sitting in your car right now, or walking your dog, or staring out a window. You feel this quiet, gnawing realization.
It's a profound sense of dissonance.
It really is. You look around at your life and you see that you have achieved the safety and stability that society promised would bring you ultimate fulfillment. You have the roof, you have the routine, you have the steady rhythm of a responsible existence.
You're surviving beautifully. By all external observable metrics, you are a resounding success.
But there is a hollow echo inside, like the vibrant, wild spark of actually living feels dim. You're safe, but you are not entirely awake.
And that right there is the core paradox of the modern human condition. I mean, we have engineered a reality optimized almost exclusively for absolute physical survival, yet it so often leaves us feeling spiritually breathless.
So what's our goal today? Because we need to unpack this.
Well, today our mission is to explore the architecture of human potential. We're going to examine the invisible scripts that dictate the rhythmic pacing of our daily lives, those quiet algorithms running in the background of our minds.
And figure out how to rewrite them, hopefully?
Most importantly, yes, we are going to uncover the mechanics of how to rewrite those scripts from the inside out. We are not going to look at the world as a static place you simply endure, but as a dynamic, malleable landscape that responds directly to the internal theater of your consciousness.
I love that, the internal theater of your consciousness. I want to start by looking at the origin point, though. How do we actually arrive at this state?
The state of hollow survival.
Right. How do we end up in that kitchen, holding that warm ceramic mug, feeling like we are wearing a life that just doesn't quite fit our true shape? Because, we certainly don't start out this way.
We definitely don't.
So we really have to examine this concept of the inherited script and what happens to our internal horizons as we move through the passage of eras from childhood to adulthood.
It's a gradual process, and it begins at the absolute dawn of our awareness. When we're infants, our nervous systems are incredibly plastic. We are just absorbing the emotional and psychological states of our environment.
Like sponges.
Exactly. And what we absorb, first and foremost, are the unspoken realities of our caretakers. They love us, undoubtedly. And in their intense biological drive to protect us, they hand us their worldview.
But that worldview is flawed, right?
Well, it's heavily colored by their own unfulfilled desires, their quiet regrets, their deeply ingrained anxieties.
And it's not necessarily that they sit us down and give us a lecture on what to fear. It's much more insidious than that, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It's in the micro expressions. Like the sharp intake of breath when we reach for something unknown, the tense posture when money is discussed at the dinner table.
Precisely. We possess specialized neural pathways that evolve to basically mirror the actions and emotional states of those around us. An infant observes a caretaker's stress response and subconsciously wires their own nervous system to match it.
Wow, just to ensure they stay aligned with their protector.
Exactly. Survival dictates that alignment. So the caretakers hand us their definitions of success, which are usually rooted in their own historical struggles or their own lack.
Right. They subtly convey what paths are secure, what professions command respect, what choices will keep us shielded from the harsh winds of failure.
And we take these expectations and we just put them on. It's like being handed an oversized, heavy winter coat that was never tailored for us.
Oh, I like that analogy.
We wear it because the giants of our childhood told us it would keep us warm, but it restricts our movement. It's heavy. It alters our natural gait.
That coat metaphor is incredibly visceral. You can literally feel the heavy wool dragging on your shoulders. And it stands in such stark contrast to how we begin our journey.
Think back to the very dawn of your memory.
Yeah, remember when your internal horizon was entirely limitless? Like, if an adult leaned down and asked a young child what they wanted to be, the answers were monumental.
We envisioned ourselves exploring the vast cosmos.
Or standing on a brightly lit stage performing for an endless tide of people. Or healing the world. Or building impossible, towering structures. I mean, the mind of a child simply does not recognize the concept of a boundary.
The childhood mind operates in a state of pure, unadulterated expansion. But then the machinery of socialization begins its work.
The education race.
Right, we enter the great education race. We are placed onto a highly structured track. Suddenly, learning is no longer about the joyous, chaotic discovery of the world. It becomes a fierce, highly calibrated competition.
We are taught to fear the red ink, to dread the incorrect answer.
Exactly. The fear of failure is systematically installed into our cognitive operating system. And as the passage of eras turns us into adults, a tragic transformation occurs.
Our brilliant, expansive visions begin to shrink. We learn to compromise our magnitude.
We start aiming not for greatness, not for the realization of our unique spark, but merely for safety. The grandest ambition, which once spanned galaxies, slowly degrades until our ultimate goal is merely escaping the pressure.
We dream of just getting through the decades so we can eventually retreat to a quiet, anonymous existence by the sea, finally allowed to rest.
That becomes the pinnacle of success for so many.
Okay, let's unpack this right here, because I hear that narrative, and I have to challenge the premise slightly.
Sorry.
Is it really just fear that shrinks our horizon? Or is it that we fundamentally mistake comfort for happiness because we conflate the two entirely different biological states?
That's a very important distinction.
Right, imagine this analogy. Imagine you have built a safe, incredibly sturdy house in the middle of a vast, ancient, mysterious forest. You have thick walls, heavy iron locks on the door, and a warm, crackling hearth.
It sounds perfectly secure.
It is. And you sit by that hearth every single night because it is warm, it is predictable, the fire always burns the exact same way. But because the walls are so thick and because you never leave the chair by the fire, you are entirely deaf to the vibrant, wild, astonishing symphony of life that is happening just outside your front door.
The life you're missing.
Exactly. The wind moving through the high canopy, the rustling of nocturnal creatures, the sharp scent of damp earth and crushed pine needles. You are safe from the elements, absolutely. But are you actually experiencing the forest?
No, you are not experiencing the forest. You're merely surviving its proximity. You're experiencing the absence of danger, which, from a neurological perspective, is a vastly different state than the presence of joy or vitality.
Right. It's just absence.
And this brings us to a crucial misunderstanding about human capacity and the tragedy of the dormant spark within us. We sit in that safe house, wrapped in the oversized winter coat of inherited expectations, believing that the room we are sitting in constitutes the entire universe.
We look at the four walls and think, this is all there is, and this is the absolute maximum I am capable of handling.
Which is a profound underestimation of our biological hardware.
It makes me think of a modern technological device. Like, imagine an extraordinary piece of technology engineered with an absolute endless ocean of memory. A device conceptually capable of rendering complex celestial mechanics, processing the accumulated wisdom of the world, or composing intricate symphonies.
A supercomputer, essentially.
Right, but the user who acquires this magnificent piece of engineering only fills a mere shallow puddle of that capacity. They use it for the most mundane, repetitive, uninspired tasks. Day after day, they access the exact same fractional sliver of its potential.
And eventually, they forget what it can actually do.
Yeah, the user begins to fundamentally believe that this tiny puddle is the absolute limit of the machine. They completely forget the vast ocean of dark, unused space sitting silently beneath the surface.
That is a highly accurate parallel to how human biology operates. Because if we look at the raw architecture of the human form, we are composed of a vast constellation of cells, Each individual cell is a microscopic universe vibrating with an immense magnitude of energy,
We are quite literally walking powerhouses.
capable of generating extraordinary electrical and chemical force. Yet, what do we do with this profound power? We channel the lion's share of it into merely maintaining the status quo.
We use our brilliant, complex neural networks to battle our own internal self-sabotaging voices.
Exactly. We burn our immense energetic reserves, managing our dread of the unknown, running elaborate mental simulations of catastrophic scenarios that will never arrive.
Just to ensure the thick wooden door of our safe house remains bolted shut.
That's where all the energy goes.
So, what does this all mean for our daily lived experience? It means we are living in a state of chronic metabolic suppression. We are using our limitless machine to play a very simple, repetitive game.
A game of mere endurance.
Right. And we have to talk about the absolute tragedy of what society calls the comfort zone. We use that phrase all the time, you need to step out of your comfort zone. But that phrase always bothers me.
Why is that?
Because it's a massive misnomer, isn't it? It implies that where we currently are is actually comfortable.
Oh, it is entirely misleading. I would argue we should reframe it as the predictability trap.
The predictability trap. I like that.
Because the comfort zone is rarely genuinely comfortable. In fact, for an overwhelming majority of people, this zone is filled with quiet agony, chronic low-grade stress, and deep dissatisfaction. It is not comfortable. It is simply familiar.
And the human nervous system has a profound evolutionary bias toward the familiar. Right.
A massive bias. Even if the familiar is painful, the brain prefers it because it's calculable. The brain can calculate the exact metabolic cost of your current misery. It knows precisely how much energy is required to survive a job you despise or a routine that drains you.
But the unknown forest outside the house
Represents an uncalculated variable.
and the brain hates uncalculated variables.
Despises them. From an evolutionary standpoint, the unknown is dangerous. An uncalculated variable could require a massive expenditure of metabolic energy to survive. Therefore, the brain perceives the unknown as a literal threat to existence.
So to actually live, to have true vitality, true expansive existence, it requires a conscious, courageous override of our most basic evolutionary programming.
That is the work. It requires the understanding that your brain is trying to keep you safe, but in doing so, it is keeping you stagnant.
It requires the courage to unbolt the heavy door, step out of the familiar house, and walk barefoot into the unknown forest, feeling the damp earth, while acknowledging and moving through the biological alarm bells of fear. But here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit paralyzing. Let's say you realize this. You are sitting by the hearth, you hear the call of the wild forest, and you decide, I'm going to leave this house. I am going to step out of the familiar.
Okay, the decision is made.
Right. You unbolt the door. You are standing on the threshold. The vast, chaotic, beautiful world is in front of you. Now what?
The paradox of choice.
Exactly. If the goal is to leave the predictable trap, how do we possibly choose a direction without getting completely overwhelmed by the infinite possibilities?
This is precisely where so many individuals falter. They recognize the urgent need for change, they feel the suffocating weight of the winter coat, but they lack a defined vector. They suffer from the paralysis of vague intentions.
Vague intentions.
Yes, and to understand why this paralyzes us, we must look at the mechanical way the human mind processes direction and filters reality.
Let me offer a highly relatable, concrete example of this paralysis, actually. Imagine it is late at night. There's a freezing, torrential downpour. The streets are slick with rain, the wind is howling, and you are soaked to the bone, shivering violently.
Miserable situation.
Truly. Finally, a transport carriage pulls up to the curb. You pull open the heavy door, climb into the back seat, and shake off the cold water. You are incredibly relieved just to be inside, shielded from the elements.
Safe from the storm.
Right. The driver looks at you through the mirror and asks for your destination. And you, exhausted from the storm and just wanting relief, reply, I don't know. Just take me somewhere nice. Take me anywhere that isn't out there in the rain. What happens? The driver cannot move. Somewhere nice is not a coordinate. The carriage remains absolutely stalled in the storm. The driver cannot plot a route to a vague emotional state.
In our daily lives, we do this constantly. We hold these incredibly vague, nebulous desires. We say to the universe, to ourselves, I just want to be happy, or I want a peaceful life, or I want to be financially secure.
Like giving the driver a feeling instead of an address.
Exactly. We treat the mind as if it can magically divine the specific physical architecture of our fulfillment from a generic feeling. But the mind operates as a highly sophisticated filtering system. In any given moment, you're being bombarded by a massive tide of sensory data sites, sounds, opportunities, microexpressions, patterns.
If we processed all of it, our brains would short circuit.
Instantly,
Yeah.
we would be overwhelmed. So the brain has a filtering mechanism. It only lets into your conscious awareness the data that it deems relevant to your survival or relevant to your defined goals.
And this system requires a hyper-specific destination to calculate a trajectory.
Without a definitive set of coordinates, the mind cannot allocate resources. It cannot sift through that massive tide of sensory data to find the specific opportunities, the specific conversations, or the specific pathways that lead to your goal.
So if you tell your brain somewhere nice, the filter doesn't know what to look for.
So it defaults to what it already knows, the familiar.
And without that specific destination, we just float.
We do worse than float. We become like a solitary celestial body, a stray asteroid wandering aimlessly through the vacuum of space. And what happens to a celestial body without its own strong gravitational trajectory?
It gets pulled in by something else.
It is inevitably caught by the gravity of larger, more defined planets. In human terms, if you do not have a hyper-specific destination for your own life, you will inevitably be pulled apart by the gravity of other people's agendas.
That is a terrifying thought.
You will spend your immense magnitude of energy building someone else's dream, simply because their dream had a defined shape and yours did not.
I want to pause right here and ask you, the listener, a very direct question. What is your actual destination? If you were sitting in the back of that carriage and the rain is beating against the glass and the driver is waiting for an address, what do you say?
It's a challenging question.
And I don't mean the destination society handed you. I don't mean the safe, respectable answer that your caretaker's programmed into your oversized winter coat. I mean the destination that makes your pulse quicken just thinking about it. What is the specific coordinate of your vitality?
To find that coordinate, we have to move beyond vague wishes and enter into the hard mechanics of how the brain constructs reality. We have to explore the architecture of imagination.
Okay, the architecture of imagination.
Which is essentially the process of tricking the mind into building a new future.
Wait, tricking the mind.
Yeah.
I like the rebellious sound of that, but I also want to push back a little here. When we talk about imagining a new future or building a destination, it can very quickly sound like toxic positivity.
It certainly can be misinterpreted that way.
Right. It sounds like just visualize a massive pile of wealth and it will magically appear. Because if I just sit on my couch and vividly imagine a lavish feast, I'm still going to starve if I don't get up and cook. How is this not just an exercise in delusion?
That is a vital distinction to make. Imagination without corresponding action is indeed pure delusion. We are not talking about magic, we are talking about biology. Visualizing the feast will not materialize the food out of thin air.
Okay.
However, visualizing the feast with intense, hyper-specific sensory detail fundamentally alters your biological state, which in turn alters your behavior and your cognitive filtering.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of that. How do we build this destination in a way that actually changes our biology, rather than just entertaining us like a daydream? We established that you can't just tell the carriage driver somewhere nice.
Right, you can't just say, I want a house by the sea. That is too vague.
So how do we make it real for the brain? Let's do a deeply sensory visualization exercise right now. Let's actually build that destination.
The absolute key is sensory density. You have to provide the brain with the exact physical textures of the destination. You must pair a clear, defined intention with an elevated, intensely felt emotion.
Okay, let's build the house by the sea. We don't just see a generic white building from a distance. Imagine walking up the path. Feel the satisfying crunch of the gravel shifting beneath the soles of your shoes.
The auditory and tactile input.
Yes, you reach the front door. I want you to feel the heavy, cold metal of the handle resting in your palm. Feel the mechanical resistance as you push it down, the heavy thud of the latch as the door clicks open. You step inside.
And the environment shifts.
Immediately, feel the temperature change on your skin. Feel the smooth, sun-warmed ceramic tiles beneath your bare feet. It is grounding, solid, retaining the heat of the day. Now breathe in. What does the air smell like?
It has to be specific.
It isn't just a generic ocean smell. It is the sharp, bracing, salty air blowing through an open window, perfectly mixed with the sweet, heavy scent of specific blooming flora, perhaps jasmine or night-blooming citrus drifting in from the garden.
You're layering the senses.
You look across the room, and you watch the precise angle of the golden hour light. That rich, honey-colored afternoon sun cutting across the room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, casting long, dramatic shadows on the plastered wall.
What you are doing there is bypassing the logical, critical faculties of the conscious mind and speaking directly to the deeper primal architecture of the nervous system.
So the brain actually buys it.
The amygdala and
Yeah.
the hippocampus, the regions involved in emotion and memory formation, do not distinguish between a highly detailed, emotionally resonant internal visualization and an external event.
That's wild.
If a dream lacks the dense, heavy texture of physical reality,
Huh.
the brain easily dismisses it as a fleeting illusion. It files it away as a daydream, a pleasant distraction that requires no biological or behavioral change.
But when you add the textures,
When you immerse yourself in the sensory details, the cold metal, the warm tile, the smell of salt and jasmine, you are chemically convincing your biology that this event is occurring in the present moment.
you are forming a memory of the future.
Precisely. And when the brain believes this reality is occurring, it begins to alter your cognitive filter. Suddenly, that endless tide of sensory data is being scanned for the components to build this reality. You start noticing the opportunities, the materials, the conversations that align with the warm ceramic tile and the smell of jasmine.
Here is where it gets incredibly fascinating. We are not just talking about psychological priming here. We are talking about the hard physical mechanics of neuroplasticity. We are talking about phantom melodies and the literal thicket of the mind.
Yes, let us ground this philosophical visualization exercise in empirical biological observation. There's a profound understanding regarding human neurology that perfectly illustrates this phenomenon of tricking the mind.
Okay, tell us about it.
Consider a controlled observation involving the complex, timeless melodies of a classical composer, meant to be played on a grand piano.
Set the scene for us. What exactly happens in this observation?
Imagine two distinct groups of individuals. The first group is instructed to sit at the physical instrument. Day after day, for hours at a time, they physically practice a highly complex melody.
Doing the actual work.
Right. They strike the keys, they feel the mechanical resistance of the ivory and wood beneath their fingertips, they hear the auditory feedback of the hammers striking the strings. They train the muscles in their hands, wrists, and forearms to execute the precise choreography of the music. They're interacting directly with physical reality.
Okay, so they are building muscle memory the traditional way. And the second group?
The second group is placed in a room with absolute silence. No piano, no physical instrument whatsoever. They are instructed to sit quietly, close their eyes, and only imagine practicing the melody.
Just imagining it.
But they must do it with the sensory density we just discussed. They must vividly visualize their hands moving over the keys, feeling the weight and resistance of the notes in their minds, hearing the phantom melody echoing in their consciousness. They must dedicate the exact same amount of time and intense mental focus to this internal rehearsal as the first group dedicates to physical practice.
On the surface, it sounds almost absurd. Sitting in a silent room, moving ghost fingers in the empty air, and expecting to learn a complex piece of music.
It completely challenges our fundamental assumptions about how skills are acquired. But the astonishing result forces a paradigm shift in our understanding of reality.
What happens?
When the neurological landscapes of both groups are examined, when we look at the physical structure of their brains, the neural pathways, the dense, complex thickets of connections responsible for motor control and musical execution, develop identically in both groups.
Wait, I need to make sure I am understanding the scale of this. You are saying that the physical readiness of the muscles, the actual biological wiring in the brain that controls the physical movement of the hands, transforms simply through the power of directed, intensely focused thought.
That is exactly what happens. To understand why, we have to look at how a habit or a skill is physically built in the brain. When you learn something new, neurons fire together. There's a fundamental principle in neuroscience. Neurons that fire together wire together. As you repeatedly practice a sequence, whether physically or vividly in your imagination, the brain recognizes the repeated demand.
It sees a pattern.
Yes, and to make this pathway more efficient, a specialized type of cell begins wrapping a fatty substance called a myelin sheath around the axon of the neuron.
Oh, it's like wrapping insulation around a raw copper wire to make the electrical signal travel faster and prevent the current from leaking.
A perfect analogy. As the silent group vividly imagined playing the piano, their brains were firing the exact same sequence of neurons as the physical group, and the brain responded by heavily insulating those pathways with myelin.
That is incredible.
The dense thicket of neural connections blossomed in the minds of the silent group exactly as it did in the minds of the group pounding on the physical keys.
So what does this all mean for us sitting in our cars or making our morning coffee? It means the mind cannot distinguish between an event that is vividly, intensely imagined and one that is physically experienced in the external world.
The inescapable conclusion is that the brain processes intense, sensory-rich imagination using the exact same physical hardware as physical interaction.
So it's real to the brain.
Entirely real. By rehearsing a future of triumph, a future of joy, a future of profound peace with intense sensory detail, we literally rewrite the biological wiring of our present selves. We begin to alter our neural architecture to match reality that has not yet materialized.
That is staggering. Let's connect the dots on what that implies, because if my brain doesn't know the difference between the trauma I am obsessively replaying from the past and the triumph I am vividly constructing for the future, then I am entirely responsible for the neural pathways I'm paving right now.
You are the architect.
If I sit in traffic and rehearse anxiety, if I vividly imagine my boss yelling at me, or a financial disaster, I am actively wrapping myelin around the neural pathways of panic. I am physically wiring myself to be more efficient at feeling anxious.
Exactly. You are mastering anxiety.
But if I rehearse the sun-warmed tiles of the house by the sea, I am wiring myself for peace and capability.
And this neurological wiring does not operate in a vacuum. The brain is the master control center for the rest of the body. The signals it sends directly orchestrate the fluid chemistry of your physical form.
Which moves us from the rigid structure of the brain's neural nets to the flowing chemical symphony of the body.
Yes, how do our daily habits, our moment-to-moment choices, either support or actively sabotage this mental rewiring?
Because we aren't just electrical circuits, we are walking fluid chemistry sets.
We are constantly navigating a highly delicate equilibrium of internal alchemy. On one side of the scale, we have the primal hormones of survival. This is the ancient, incredibly powerful chemical surge. The cortisol, the adrenaline that evolved to prepare our ancestors to flee predators or fight for their lives.
Fight or flight.
Right. It is designed for acute, immediate life or death situations.
The problem is, modern life doesn't feature many predatory cats chasing us across the savannah. Instead, our predators are traffic jams, passive-aggressive emails, an unexpected bill, and a constant, glowing stream of global catastrophe delivered right to our pockets.
And the physical body cannot tell the difference between a physical predator and a psychological threat. The biological response is identical.
Wow.
When we live in a state of vague, persistent anxiety, when we spend our days complaining about the state of the world, rehearsing past grievances, and focusing on our limitations, we constantly flood our system with the chemistry of survival. We keep the internal alarm bell ringing perpetually.
But let's get into the mechanics of that. What actually happens to the body when that survival chemistry is constantly flooding the system? It's not just that we feel stressed and our body is physically altering its priorities, right?
It entirely shuts down your creative horizons. Let's look at the vascular response. When an organism believes it is under imminent threat, the survival chemistry causes the blood vessels in the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for logic, long-term planning, and creative problem-solving, to literally constrict.
Cuts off the blood supply.
The blood flow is aggressively shunted away from the creative centers and pushed toward the hindbrain, which controls reactive survival instincts, and toward the extremities, the arms and legs, to prepare for a fight or a sprint.
So you become biologically incapable of creative thought. You literally cannot think your way out of the problem because the blood has left the building.
You are biologically locked into the narrow reality of the present struggle. You cannot envision a different future because the biological machinery required for vision is currently offline, starved of fuel.
Man, so to rewrite our scripts, to gather the courage to walk out of the safe house, we must actively intervene in this chemical symphony.
We must.
We have to manually flesh out the survival chemistry and invite in the chemistry of growth, the restorative hormones that allow the prefrontal cortex to come back online. And this isn't just about positive thinking. This involves the hard, sensory, physical realities of daily life.
It requires profound physical intervention. Two of the most potent interventions are incredibly fundamental. First, the absolute necessity of the restorative silence of the night.
Sleep.
Deep, uninterrupted sleep is not a luxury. It is the primary mechanical process by which the brain flushes metabolic waste.
Like the lymphatic system clearing out the cellular debris of the day.
Precisely. It is a biological washing machine. Without it, the chemical equilibrium cannot recalibrate. The survival hormones remain stagnant in the system, and the restorative ones cannot replenish.
And the second intervention.
Rhythmic movement under the open sky.
Excellent.
Engaging the physical body through exercise, breathing deeply, changing your sensory environment. This physically metabolizes the stagnant stress chemistry. It burns off the excess cortisol and triggers the release of the chemistry associated with vitality, reward, and neuroplasticity.
It is about forcefully changing the physical state of the body so the mind has fertile ground to work with. Let's bring this into a concrete daily practice, a real-life application.
Let's do that.
Let's look back at the morning routine we talked about at the very beginning of this exploration. The mechanical alarm goes off, the floorboards are cold. What is the standard modern reaction?
Reaching for the phone.
We reach for the glowing screen beside the bed. We immediately flood our freshly awakened, highly impressionable brain with the anxiety of the world, the urgent demands of the inbox, the curated competitive lives of others. We spike the survival chemistry before our feet even hit the floor.
It is a devastating act of chemical self-sabotage. You are priming your nervous system for threat before the day has even begun.
So let's redesign it. Let's replace it with a different morning ritual. You wake up, you actively ignore the screen, you walk into the bathroom, you splash cold water on your face.
A physical shock.
A physical shock that resets the vagus nerve and interrupts any groggy anxiety loops. And then you look deeply into your own eyes in the mirror, not critically. You are not checking for wrinkles or flaws or signs of aging. You look at yourself with a moment of intense, intentional self-compassion.
Setting a new baseline.
And you consciously declare the frequency of your day. You do not wait passively to see what kind of day it will be. You dictate the terms. You speak it aloud. You tune the instrument before you start playing the music.
By establishing that intentional frequency, you are actively choosing the chemical cocktail that will bathe your cells for the next several hours. You are shifting from a reactive state to a proactive state. You are stepping into the role of the conductor in your internal symphony rather than just being an instrument played by circumstance.
And this internal chemical shift naturally bleeds into our external reality. If we change our internal chemistry, we change our cognitive filter. We change what we notice in the endless tide of data.
We change what we interact with.
Which brings up an analogy that I often hear, and I want to challenge you on it because it can sound a bit cliche. The idea of the garden of attention. It sounds like something you'd read on a bumper sticker. Water the flowers, not the weeds.
It does have the ring of a platitude, but only until you examine the stark neurological mechanisms beneath the metaphor. The mind is fundamentally an agricultural space, governed by strict laws of resource allocation.
Okay, let's explore it through that neurological lens. Imagine your mind is a plot of incredibly fertile soil. It will grow absolutely anything you plant in it without moral judgment.
It doesn't care what the seed is.
Currently, if you look at the average mind, that plot of soil might be populated by a thick scattering of thorny, aggressive, highly resilient flora. Think of them as the cacti of our fears, our resentments, our self-doubts, our habitual complaints.
The thorny plants.
Now, here's the crucial part. Attention is the water. Every single time we complain about our circumstances, every time we focus intensely on our limitations, every time we rehearse a grievance from the past, we are walking out into that garden with a heavy watering can and pouring water directly onto the roots of those thorns.
We are feeding them.
We are biologically feeding the very things that are strangling us.
To translate that from a bumper sticker into hard science, we must look at the observer effect in physics, but more intimately at synaptic pruning in neurobiology. The brain is incredibly efficient. It operates on a use it or lose it principle.
Right, because maintaining neural pathways requires a massive amount of metabolic energy.
Exactly. So the brain constantly monitors which pathways are being used, which thoughts are receiving your sustained attention. Attention is water. Means attention is neurochemical reinforcement.
So when you focus on a fear,
you send an electrical impulse down that specific neural pathway. The brain recognizes the activity and strengthens the connection. Conversely, if you stop focusing on a fear, the brain recognizes that the pathway is no longer active. It assumes it is no longer necessary for survival.
And what happens to the pathway?
Specialized cells called microglia literally move in and digest the unused synaptic connections. They prune the dead branches.
That is fascinating. The brain literally eats its own unused fears to conserve energy.
It does.
So if you suddenly decide that you want to rewrite your script, if you decide to plant the seeds of an entirely new life, let's say a vibrant fruit-bearing tree representing that house by the sea or that new creative endeavor, what must you mechanically do?
You must perform an act of radical resource reallocation. You must take all of your water, all of your light, all of your sustained cognitive and emotional attention, and focus it entirely on the fragile new neural pathways of the fruit-bearing tree.
While starving the old ones.
You must consciously reinforce the new vision while simultaneously denying attention to the old fears.
But here is the extraordinarily difficult part. Here is where the vast majority of people give up and retreat back to the safe house by the hearth. When you stop watering the thorns, when you consciously refuse to engage in complaining, when you stop entertaining the familiar anxieties, those thorny plants do not just die quietly.
No, they don't.
They will seemingly scream for your attention. The old habits, the heavily myelinated established neural pathways, will violently rebel against being starved. Your brain will create urgent, panicky feelings demanding that you return to your old anxieties. It feels like a genuine physical danger.
It does feel like danger, and this requires a profound cognitive reframing. When you feel that immense discomfort, that powerful gravitational urge to return to the familiar loop of worry and complaint, you must understand what is actually happening on a cellular level.
It's not a real threat.
That discomfort is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It is not a psychic intuition of impending doom. That discomfort is merely the sound of the old self starving to death.
Wow, the sound of the old self starving. That is a chilling but deeply empowering way to frame the pain of growth.
It is the literal, physical, architectural collapse of the old neural pathways. The microglia are doing their work. You are witnessing the death throes of your own inherited limitations.
The friction.
The friction you feel is the resistance of the old wiring breaking down to make way for the new. In that moment of panic, you must hold the watering can steady over the new seed. You must let the thorns wither in the dry, unforgiving soil of your inattention.
We're talking about defying the gravitational pull of our past conditioning. And to truly understand the scale of what is possible when a human being masters this, when they align their sensory vision, their emotional chemistry, and their unyielding, ruthless attention, I want to share a sweeping historical epic. Let's call this the Conqueror's Blueprint.
I love looking at history for this.
This is the ultimate illustration of defying inherited limitations and biological fear.
History provides the most stark, undeniable examples of the unbroken mind in action.
Let's travel back to a distant era. We are looking at a young, visionary leader standing before an ancient, monumental citadel. For generations, the wise elders, the greatest military tacticians, and the rulers of the known world had deemed this citadel entirely impregnable.
A fortress.
Its walls were legendary. It was the ultimate, impenetrable safe house of its time. Furthermore, the waters providing the only strategic access to the city were guarded by a massive, unimaginably heavy iron chain stretching entirely across the strait. This chain rendered any traditional naval approach absolutely impossible.
A physical and psychological boundary.
That the entire world accepted as a fixed, unalterable law of reality.
Any normal mind, bound by the inherited scripts of that era, would have looked at those massive walls, looked at the undeniable reality of the iron chain in the water, calculated the impossible odds, and retreated.
It's the logical thing to do.
A normal mind accepts the boundaries defined by its predecessors. A normal mind calculates the metabolic cost of failure and chooses the predictability trap.
But this visionary leader possessed a mind that was unbroken by societal conditioning. They were not wearing the oversized winter coat of previous generations' failures.
They operated differently.
Operating from a place of limitless, almost childhood-like expansive creativity, combined with the fierce, unyielding will of a sovereign, the leader looked at the water blocked by the chain. Then they look at the steep, unforgiving, densely wooded mountain peaks beside the water. And they ordered the impossible.
What did he do?
They commanded that massive, heavy timber tracks be built, greased with animal fat to reduce friction, and that the entire naval fleet, massive wooden warships, be dragged by hand and beast over the top of the steep mountain peaks.
Over a mountain.
They entirely bypassed the chained waters, dragging ships over land, and dropped them directly into the harbor behind enemy lines.
It is an act of breathtaking cognitive rebellion. To look at a massive wooden warship, a vessel explicitly designed for water, and decide it belongs on top of a mountain requires a mind that refuses to recognize the word impossible.
It requires a mind that does not filter reality based on past precedent.
When we synthesize everything we have explored today, this historical epic carries a profound modern weight. It is the large-scale physical manifestation of the silent piano experiment.
Yes,
It is the realization of the house by the sea, but played out on the stage of empires. The impossible is only impossible until a single human mind refuses to accept the boundary.
It is the ultimate manifestation of pulling a deeply imagined future, a future where the impenetrable citadel is taken into physical reality through sheer, unyielding, creatively brilliant intention. They bypass the iron chain not by breaking it, but by entirely changing the paradigm of where a ship could travel.
And that is the central thesis of our exploration today. The limitations in your life the iron chain stretched across your personal waters are largely consensual.
You are agreeing to them.
Exactly. When you align the vivid sensory imagination of your destination, when you rewrite the chemical symphony of your body by refusing to water the thorns of your fears, you develop the capacity to drag your own ships over your own mountains. You stop fighting the chain and you transcend the landscape entirely.
So let's gently bring this vast, sweeping exploration back down to Earth, back to the exact coordinate you are occupying right now. I want you, the listener, to bring your awareness fully back to the room you are sitting in. Feel the physical weight of your body against the chair or the rhythmic impact of your feet walking on the path. Notice the exact temperature of the air you are breathing in this very second.
As we synthesize these mechanical and philosophical concepts, the vital takeaway is a total paradigm shift in your identity. You are not a passive victim of your circumstances.
You are not a secondary character reciting a script written by your caretakers, your past traumas, or societal expectations.
You are the sole architect of your internal universe. The passage of time is guaranteed the eras will turn regardless of your actions. But the quality of that time, the vibrant vitality of your experience, is entirely subject to the theater of your mind.
You hold the watering can, you hold the pen, you control the chemical frequency. The immense raw power vibrating within the vast constellation of your cells is simply waiting for a hyper-specific coordinate to move toward. So I want to leave you with a final lingering question.
Something to ponder as you turn off the audio.
As you step back into the rhythm of your day, as you stand by your own hearth in your own mysterious forest,
A question to carry into the quiet spaces of your routine.
if your mind is a silent, tireless loom, continuously weaving the solid fabric of your tomorrow based entirely on the raw threads of today's dominant thoughts, emotions, and sensory visualizations, what invisible design are you quietly weaving right now in the background of your consciousness?